What is your pleasure tolerance? Do you know what your pleasure tolerance is? Do you know how much pleasure you can tolerate? Are you restricted by religious beliefs and other norms of society that actually restrict you from having more pleasure? I would like to put forth another philosophical idea that probably breaks the norm throughout cultures in the world and maybe goes back to the ancients. Now, I want to talk about a few things on this, but it's actually from Vivation International. It's a very interesting article. I'm going to provide the link for this. I'm going to go over some highlights. It was written by Jim Leonard. And, actually, I want to talk about something else here, just to ad lib a little bit. Dr. Bob Beck, PhD, who talked about some of his cures, which I think have some merit, maybe not to the extent he talked about, but he talked about many people have a death wish inside of them. It's like they think that sometime after they die, they will be rewarded for all the pain and things they inflicted upon themselves and denial and all this kind of garbage in next life. It's kind of imbued into them by religion. But his article, I'm going to go over a couple things because it's a pretty cool concept. It probably goes back to the way the ancients used to think. He goes on to state, everybody has a pleasure tolerance. Some people can tolerate more pleasure than others. I know people who have a very low tolerance to pleasure. They constantly make negative statements about themselves and their lives. They don't laugh at jokes, and they almost never do anything for fun. If I compliment them on something, they don't accept the compliment. I know people who have a very high tolerance to pleasure. They love work. They have plenty of money, and I want to emphasize that because working should be fun, right? They naturally take good care of their health because they want to live. They laugh and initiate fun wherever they go because you want to make the best out of any situation. The difference between people who enjoy their lives a lot and those who enjoy their lives only a little is not luck, education, or genes. The difference is in their level of pleasure tolerance. Now, I want to talk about, going back to the ancient times, pretty much the goal was to have pleasure and have fun. And that's basically what the goal should be today in a lot of ways, too. I mean, yes, you should have work, but the thing is, I think work should be a break from pleasure. Basically, that's the way it runs. And that's basically the most anti-religious statement you could possibly make. Now, I want to actually ad-lib a little bit here on religion, not to totally knock it per se, but I think in a lot of ways, religion was created by the masters on the top to keep people in control because they will be rewarded in the afterlife. In other words, the master who was here alive today with all his money and his houses and everything like that, he will be burning in hell asking for a little bit of water while you're up there in heaven because you were his servant for the whole time you were here on earth. That is not exactly how it works. I think that's a scam actually perpetrated by the masters of the New World Order, the global plantation, or whatever the hell you want to call it. So I actually have great discern for that, and I realize that it's not true. We should always seek pleasure. And, the thing is, back in the ancient times, they probably had a more realistic view of life before, I'd say, Christianity came on to being, because it's not exactly Christ's teachings that the religious people teach. They're not the same. They're not the same at all. If you really think about it, if you just read the red words, Christ was not somebody of like, deny this, deny that, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's really from the people on the top. That's really what it is. But he goes on to state that about religions. Some religions reduce a person's tolerance to pleasure by teaching people that they are not worthy of God's love, or by giving them other negative messages. Obviously, if you're taught to believe that pleasure is sinful or that somebody else suffers because of your pleasure, then you are not very tolerant of pleasure. And actually, this is pretty much the problem with everything. And I always try to tell the ladies this too. In the extreme form, negative condition from religion can make people intolerant of other people's pleasure too. So you do not want to be intolerant. Shame in your negative feelings, and I need you to think you don't deserve pleasure. But actually you do. You do deserve pleasure as much as possible. So he goes on with this, and I'll get down to a list. And he says, make a list of things that give you pleasure. From the list, choose the things that give you the most pleasure of all. Make a list of things you would do in order to have vivid experience of that pleasure. From that list, choose the things. This is about the most anti-religious thing going. I mean, this pretty much violates all the major religions. But this is not about religion. This is about Vivation International. Vivation International. A new philosophy. And from that list, choose the things you are willing to do as part of that exercise. Make a list of ways you would make that experience even more pleasurable. Now you have a plan. Put that plan into action. So now, I guess the only problem you have here is with, if you're talking about sexual pleasure, is STDs. But, there's maybe a way to conquer those too. And actually, if Monsanto wants to get into cloning people who do not have an actual immunity to various STDs, they might make the perfect partners to give pleasure to other people, because that could be a major boon to the sex industry in itself. But I have to say that this is actually a great concept. It's an irreligious concept, but so what? So what? It's a philosophical concept. Actually, if you go back to the old adage, philosophers have never killed the religious. It's the religious who killed and persecuted the philosophers. Let us keep that straight. So, it's almost like they don't want people to have fun. They don't want to have people to have fun. It's like you have to break away from society's norms and just do your own thing, and do like the ancients did. Do as they did in Rome, and consider the globe one big Roman orgy. So that's my advice for today. And, it's like you have to really examine your pleasure tolerance. What is it in your mind that stops you from having pleasure? Is there something wrong? I mean, in other words, the religious would say, this is Satanism. That's what they would say. They would say that. But, I don't know what the hell you call it. I don't think it's anything, to tell you the truth. I call it common sense. If it isn't hurting somebody else, what's their problem? What's their problem? And, it's almost like the religious have the biggest problem with these things. They do. It's like the judgmental and everything else. So, but, that's the way I look at it, And actually, in the United States, with our Bill of Rights that actually protects everybody's individual rights, it is about the pursuit of happiness. And actually, that really means the pursuit of pleasure. So this is actually a tenet and a doctrine of the United States of America and its freedoms. So, in coordination with people like, let's say, the Hells Angels or something, who are out about of pleasure, riding motorcycles, having fun, drugs, sex, beer, and everything else. Basically, as long as you're pursuing your own goals and not in violation of anybody else's, guess what? That's your own right to do so, and that's actually what the United States is about. So we are actually about, we should be, as a free country, the most pleasure-tolerant country in the world. And don't listen to Vladimir Putin about his corrupt West, because, the guy plays the game on the top too, just like everybody else. He just doesn't let the peasants do it. So let's be free and pursue our own goals.